All right, today is class 16. I only have 5 fingers, so that's kind of weird. So put 6 over here, 1 over here, 16. It's not class 16 per se, it's video 16. All right, so no confusion with that. Because we missed a video because my kids are sick. Don't worry, I'm just massively, contagious still. I'm joking, not contagious at all, hopefully. Wasn't sick. I think I got out of that one unscathed. But they got tested, so at least one of them did. She didn't have COVID, so we're going to make the assumption that the rest of them didn't either. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the Constitution as a whole. Then we're going to talk about, there'll be some obvious review of the 3 branches of government. That's going to be the important thing, is that we keep, bringing up the separation of powers and the balance of powers. The distinction between what they are supposed to do. There's a reason I say that, okay? Because if you watched the last video, you may notice that I talked about different judicial philosophies, and I accused one group of people of using the judicial branch as another branch of legislation, or another legislative branch. And we are going through that right now with the confirmation hearings of Amy Coney Barrett, where one group is very upset because she's not going to rule the way they want her to rule, and she says, well, that's not the role of a judge. You want laws, you've got to basically legislate laws, and I just call whether or not it's constitutional or not. Okay? But the left, that would be the Democrats, they want to make sure that the judicial branch is going to uphold certain things, like make it unchangeable, such as the Affordable Care Act, unchangeable in abortion. And so they want to make sure that the courts legislate in certain ways that where it becomes precedent. And once a court says it and establishes as a precedent, it's really difficult to change. So the right, that be the conservatives, are like, this is just not the role of the judicial branch. The role of the judicial branch is to look at the law and see if it's constitutional or not make the law. And so there's a big tissy fit right now going on where the Democrats are like, well, we're not going, and of course I'm making fun of the Democrats right now because they should be made fun of in this case. I'm just going to take my ball and go home. And am I biased? Yes, I am. Okay, is that okay? Yes, it should be, because if you went to U of H, you'd be biased the other way, and they'd be unabashedly biased, okay? The only difference is they would tell you they're not biased, they're just correct, okay? I'm telling you I'm biased, in that I think I'm correct. And I know I'm correct in the fact that they have 2 different judicial philosophies. Nobody's going to argue with me on that. Okay, it's just whether or not I think it ought to be that way. Okay, and so do you have to agree with me to make a good grade in here? No, you don't. No, of course not. You just need to know the judicial philosophies and know why you believe what you believe, okay? That's the goal, is to teach you how to think, not what to think. You want to be taught what to think, go to another school, okay? You can go get indoctrinated. I do want to indoctrinate you into Christ. How's that? Is that good? Okay, that's good, because that's what we're here for. But that philosophical position on the judicial branch is kind of in a fight right now. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the rest of the Constitution, not as exciting, okay? And then once we blast through that, we're going to talk about the Bill of Rights. And from the Bill of Rights, there are 10 amendments. We'll talk a little bit about those. And then after that, since then, there have been 17 more amendments, which brings us up to how many amendments to the Constitution? This is a math question, I know. You're like, yeah, I mean, it's 27. 10 plus 17 is 27, if you figured that one out yet. Yeah, okay. It's 22. It's a joke, it's 27. All right. So I think we could get started. Any of my notes I could put online. I could. I may.
I have a question.
Sure, please. I like questions.
Do you, when do you think our midterm is gonna happen?
We just had kind of a quiz, right? Let me get through this.
Okay.
And then you'll have the full Constitution. You'll have the constitutional principles. You'll have the Mayflower Compact. You'll have the English Bill of Rights and all that stuff I put up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you talk about natural law. So it's supposed that once I'm done with this, finish this in about 20 minutes. Joking. Then we'll have a midterm. So we're pretty good on that. We're like what, 9 weeks in?
I think so.
8?
I think it's 9. 9.
I think we're on 9th week. We usually try to get it around the 8th, given that there's 16 weeks, right?
Yes.
That makes about sense. But as I think I told you, I don't know if I told you, I told the class either Tuesday or today or something, or maybe it was my other course, but not in a hurry.
Okay.
I mean, we're gonna get there. It's because I want to get through this, and once I get through this, then we'll talk about the other stuff, and then we're gonna get into Texas politics, okay? And there's gonna be a lot to talk about. We're gonna talk about the political process. We're gonna talk about bureaucracy, which is a big topic right now that we should be aware of, you know, who's really in charge of government, right? If you want to be in charge, should you run for office or should you join a bureau, you know, an agency and just work your way to the top, and then you have power and it's unelected and they can't fire you. You can tell I got a little chip on my shoulder about that one too. You know, nobody likes bureaucracies unless you like filling out paperwork. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so with the Constitution, we started off, you know, you gotta understand the Constitution started off with the principles in mind. It is a natural law document, whether people like to admit that nowadays or not. There are two views of it. One, that it's a living, breathing document, as I said in my last lecture. That'd be on Tuesday. Some believe that, and I do not. It is a document, and the principles do not change. The application changes of those principles. But others believe that those principles change with the culture. And that could be a very scary thing, because that could make the Constitution say anything. And if it says anything, then it says nothing. And there's no reason to have one. So there are some who believe it's a living, breathing document and that the principles change with culture. Others believe that the principles do not change, but perhaps the applications of those principles do. Things will come along and the principles will be invoked. All right. But the words are what the words are. They were meant by the framers in the context of the situation. So there are 5 principles I'd like you to know of the Constitution. One is popular sovereignty. This is the concept where it's the rule of the people that provides legitimacy for the government. The rule of the people provide legitimacy for the government. I could give a whole lecture right now on our current situation where I just mentioned the judicial branch. Who makes laws? The legislative branch. The legislative branch is actually what? The arm of whom? The people. You put it in the hands of the unelected judiciary. You have taken decisions, the sovereignty, the rule, the governance out of the hands of the people and put it in the hands of those who have lifelong appointments, who have not been elected. Number 2, limited government. That the government actually has to justify its decisions. They have to justify what they do. If they're going to impose a law, it is incumbent upon them to show why they are doing so, that they have to bring it before the people. And that government is limited. It is not all-encompassing. It is not all-powerful. Now, do you want more government or less government? That's a question for you. Does anybody here want more government? Well, we all say no, right? Because when the government does something, it does what? It governs it, right? Who wants more law in their lives? Who wants the government to tell you what to do more of and tell you what to do less of? How many can say yes? None of you do. Yet, when we vote, we often vote for the government to give us things. That whenever the government says, I will give you this for free, that is a lie. The word free means just exchange the word free for education is now provided by the taxpayer. And the taxpayer is you, no matter how many times they say the rich. Okay? Because everybody pays taxes. So when the government says that and you vote for this to come in, then you voted for the government to actually provide something. And when the government provides something, it must do what? Govern it. And when they govern it, there's more of it. Thus, you have voted for more government, for bigger government. Okay? But there were 5 principles, and the second one was limited government. And so we asked the question, where does that limit end? And how much more do we allow? That's always on the voting block. Okay? Federalism. Now, this is a concept that allows the states and the federal government to share responsibilities and share power. Now, there are policing powers that the states and the cities provide us for the well-being and security of the citizenry. And then the federal government provides protection on a national level, whether it be federal policing or whether it be the military protecting us from external enemies, or even domestic enemies to some degree. Number 4, the separation of powers. And this is what you heard me just complaining about here with turning the judicial branch into a legislative branch. That if we can't get our way in the voting booth with the legislators, then we shall make sure that the Supreme Court makes it the law of the land. Okay? Well, providing different branches of government with equal powers, and they are separate powers. You have the judicial branch, which is supposed to obviously interpret the law, not create the law. Then you have the executive branch, which executes the law, but of course the law needs to originate in the legislative body. And the legislative branch is supposed to be the one that is most accessible to the people. You can call your legislature, literally. The chance of you getting on the phone with the President of the United States is very, very small. very, very small to get on the phone with the Supreme Court justice, I'm sure. But I tell you what, if you know your legislator, you could probably email them and at least get their assistant. And if you set up a meeting with them, there's a good chance you could you can get a meeting with them and have a discussion with them. It's even more so with your state legislator. And then your city council, much easier. You go to the city council meetings, you just step up to the podium and you give your 2 cents on why you think you should have some speed bumps on your road because some jerk keeps speed. I almost got a ticket right from my son yesterday. Apparently, there's a stop sign going down my street, right? Somebody called up the city council and said, you guys need to start getting some police out here, right? Because these jerks keep running the stop sign. Sure enough, I'm driving home, I got my kid in the back, and I look up and I see a stop sign. I don't know why I miss it. I drive it every day, and I hit the brakes. I'm like, and then I look over, I'm like, karate cop. And he pulls me over, sure enough, right in front of my house. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, hey, officer. And he's like, hey, I saw you stop when you saw me. I said, well, quite frankly, I just want to let you know, for the record, I was stopping because I missed the stop sign, and then I saw you, and I realized I was busted anyway. I said, but I understand, I get it, you got me. And so, he's like, well, I'm not going to give you a ticket today. But if somebody, people have been calling about, missing the, stop sign. I said, yeah, I bet. Sure enough, it's so funny. I'm loading my kid, and I look over, and he pulled over the person whose house is right next to the stop sign. I wonder if that was the person who called anyway, that'd be funny. They're like, man, these guys get called the city council, and they're like, people keep running the stop sign, and then all of a sudden they're the ones getting busted. Well, anyway, politics, the legislative branch should be a lot closer to you, okay? Now, by the way, you're not gonna call Dan Crenshaw or, in our case, Lizzie Fletcher about this. You're gonna call, city council. Okay, that's a city issue. Those are city police officers. But you realize, you're certainly not going to call the President of the United States and get him on. It's possible. I mean, I highly doubt it. Has any of you ever written the President of the United States a letter? You'll get a response. It's from the office of the auto pen. Have the President's signature on there. Maybe you should do it. My wife has a letter from Ronald Reagan, and my son, I think, just wrote President Trump a letter, so maybe he'll get a response with that big old marker written signature on it. That'd be kind of cool, huh? You're like, nah, I don't think so. You're like, unimpressed. I don't know. Well, it's worth a try, right? All right. Checks and balances. So we separate the powers, but then we have checks and balances. This is the important one. Is that each branch of government can put a halt to the other branch's overreach. That if the legislature goes too far, the judicial branch, or the president can veto the bill. And if they override that veto, the Supreme Court could possibly overturn it on constitutional grounds, saying it's unconstitutional. If in fact it's unconstitutional, that's what I'm saying. So like, the legislative branch says, hey, we're going to create a law that gets rid of the president, and the judicial branch says, no, you're not. It's unconstitutional. It's in the Constitution. We'll have a president. Okay. We're going to reenact slavery. No, we're not. We've gotten rid of slavery. Okay, we'll talk a bit about that today in the amendments. It's unconstitutional, right? Not going to happen. So, and if the judicial branch does something wrong, well then guess what? You can actually impeach. You can get rid of judicial Supreme Court justices. You can do what? You can impeach them. Now, of course, you have to show that they've been naughty, so to speak. that they've done something wrong, that they've abused their practice, they've not been faithful to the Constitution, perhaps. Personally, I think it's perfectly justifiable if somebody were just trying to legislate from the bench that you could do that. I think that's a good one. All right, so you got that. You've got the 5 principles: the checks and balances, the separation of powers, federalism, limited government, popular sovereignty. Article 1 talks about the legislative branch. We already did that. I want you to know specifically on a midterm. I do want you to know the presidential powers, okay? I want you to know the executive branch. I want you to know not only what they do, but their powers, what their formal powers are. Certainly know know how they could check the powers of the president for sure. Know the elastic clause. That is a clause that suggests that they have a right to create laws in order to perform their own powers. Okay, so any power that they have that is enumerated by the Constitution, right? It's spelled out saying you have this power. Well, they also have powers, right, to enact, do their job, and so that they can create laws to allow them to do so. Judicial branch, certainly know that. We're going to talk. See the last lecture. That has a lot more about that. Okay. Article 6 talks about the supremacy of the national government. I think you need to know that. And 7 actually talks about the ratification of the original Constitution, which is the current Constitution. When I say the original, I mean the actual Constitution, not the Articles of Confederation. Now, somewhere down there the line, during the ratification process, there were people who were upset that there was no Bill of Rights because people were worried about the rights of citizens. Okay. And there was a debate, and the debate kind of was over, should we include this, or should we just understand that rights, that the Constitution is set forth with rights in mind, and that it is written in order for the government to justify what it does in light of these rights. And of course, there were those who said, look, if we put out create a Bill of Rights, well, guess what's going to happen? People are going to think that this is your list of rights, this is your menu, and this is what you get, and this is all that there are. Keep in mind, they are operating under natural law. I wish American citizens understood that today. That the Constitution, that the rights exist prior to the Constitution. The Constitution didn't give us these rights. We need to understand that. Ironically, when we talk about the right, where the slaves were freed, while they gained their freedom, what they really gained was a loss of the infringement of the rights that they naturally possessed. Okay? They didn't gain the right to be free. They already had it. It was the government that was infringing on the right that they naturally possessed. See, that's what justified the Civil War. Was that people's natural rights were being violated. Unfortunately, you could go to the most elite schools in America, and the students have no clue about this concept of natural law. That our rights exist before they are written. They don't exist because they are written. Real rights don't need to be written. Now, why did they write them? Well, protection of those that we do have. And then they made sure in there to include rights that were not written yet. Okay? And thus, that's why we amend the Constitution. If the Constitution created rights, there'd be no need for it, because you can't violate rights that aren't written. The moral law isn't created by the written law. The written law is created to enforce the moral law, to illustrate it. The natural law is a natural moral law. The rights of man is a statement, or statements, about the value of humanity, which is a moral claim, okay? And there are moral obligations that come from that. That's why I find it interesting, this idea that do women have the right to abortions? Well, do you mean written right, or do you mean moral right? Now, a lot of women would say, well, men say this too, moral right. Really? Do you have a natural moral right to, if you know what an abortion is, and I say it to you on film, if you've seen an abortion, you would realize that is a real human being. I don't care how small you think it is. Those are real humans that are really being killed. They are really alive. Women are not pregnant with kitty cats or other species. Like, we like to change the name into fetus, but it's really, you can change a name. You're not going to change what it is, right? The natural moral law says all humans have a right to life, not humans that are located in one place versus another place, or humans that are bigger than another, or humans that look a certain way versus humans that don't look a certain way, or humans that have this ability to walk, talk, and proclaim versus humans that don't. No, it just says all humans, right? And that is before the Constitution. That's not even written in the Constitution, right? It's presupposed in the Constitution. Our rights do not come from them. So I find it interesting, though, that people would say I have a right to do it, and I want to ask them. I'm not asking you. Does one have a right to do this? And if so, is it a written right, what's called positive law, given to you by the government, which is nothing more than a permission which can be taken away? Or is it a natural right? And where do natural rights come from? We're endowed by God, by our Creator. Now, if there's no Creator, there's no endowment, and then we have no natural rights. Then everything's just positive. It's all power at that point, okay? So for the atheists, they're like, of course you have a right to that, because there's no God, so it's just written there. It's power, okay, fine. But then you can make any right in that regard, okay? So it's interesting. So if we keep in mind the natural law tendency, then we ask, or the principle, then we ask these questions about certain rights. In that regard, you go, okay, that's kind of a force fit of a square peg in a round hole, because hard to believe anyway. So when we get to this Bill of Rights, they write them down, and there's this assumption that there are other rights that exist that are not written down, because your rights are not the result of positing them. That's the point I'm making. However, just because you do write it down, it doesn't mean you actually have a natural right. You have a legal right. There was a time we had rights to own slaves. Did you have a natural right to own a slave? The answer is no, you had a legal right to. And so you can posit certain things that are morally wrong and call them rights, but that'd be false. All right. And amendment number 1. We shall go through the first 10, and then I'm just going to give you, we'll get through all 27 today because I'm going to skip some. Because some of these are just procedural amendments that are like talking about votes and stuff. But some of these are very important to us today in our political, current political climate. Amendment 1, it's important that you know which comes first, right? That Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievance. What an important amendment. How amazing that that is the first. And the very first thing they mention is religion. Now, folks, has anybody heard of the separation of church and state in here? Where do we get that term from? Where? Here in the Constitution? In the Bill of Rights? Did you see it in there? It's not there. It's not there. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say separation of church and state. In fact, the word separation is not there, is it? No. In fact, the subject of that is what? Congress. Congress shall make no law. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. Now, does it say that Congress shall make no establishment of religion? Or does it say Congress shall make no law concerning the establishment or respecting an establishment of religion? Doesn't say that, does it? It's telling Congress what they cannot do. Make a law respecting an establishment of religion. Did you know that there were already established churches in the colonies? That the different states had established churches already? Governmentally supported states where the taxes went to the church and paid for the pastors and the things that they did. Is that a good thing? Well, not if you're not going to that church, okay? And your taxpayer dollars are going to the Congregationalists and you're a Baptist. And that's a problem. You're like, I don't like this because my money, of course, nowadays everybody be like, well, it's Christian, you know. You know, because in America, our biggest concern now is non-Christian versus Christian, right? So all these denominational fights have kind of gone away, and where it's like, okay, Christian, Jesus? And you're like, yeah. And you're like, okay, cool, we're good. What? Buddha? No, get out of here. We don't like you. You know, so I don't want my money going to Buddha, right? Any kind of weird temple or anything like that. So, you know, you either move out of the state or you got to change. So anyway, they started applying this to that. And of course, where did that come from? It came from the letter, the word separation of church and state, wall of separation, that is, comes from a letter to the from Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptists. I think I've already discussed this with you, but if you haven't caught it already, the Danbury Baptists were afraid that the Congregational church was going to become the national church. Thomas Jefferson said, nah, that ain't going to happen. There's walls, we're going to erect a wall of separation, high and impregnable, he said, okay? Actually, I don't even think he used high and impregnable. In fact, you know who used that was a justice who was quoting Thomas Jefferson, referred to the wall of separation being high and impregnable. So not Thomas Jefferson. I added to that, so I apologize on video. That's a court case. But Thomas Jefferson made reference to the wall of separation, okay? And that wasn't used until 1947 in court cases, in the case of Everson versus Board of Education. Well, that doesn't mean we should have I'm not arguing we should have a state church or any of that for that matter. But it does talk about that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Can the government prohibit the free exercise of religion? You say no. Well, they can. The question is, do they have a right to? Do they have a legal right to? And of course, we can talk about the natural right. You say, you ought not do this. You're not going to stand in the way of me worshiping God. But given our current pandemic, Has it not been the case that the cities have told churches, especially in New York City, you will shut your doors? Is that, well, I mean, what happens if that gets to the Supreme Court? What ought happen? If you were the judge and you're going to compare that to the First Amendment, you're going to ask a question. They're going to say, well, look, it's a pandemic. Are you going to say, yeah, you're right, so in the case of the pandemic, I'm going to interpret the Constitution as allowing it? Or are you going to say, well, I understand it's a pandemic, but unfortunately the Constitution doesn't allow it. And if these people want to go roll the dice and get a sickness, go get sick, like they've done all their lives, flus and the like, right? Well, that's their choice. Because of the right to liberty. The principle of liberty is at stake here. And that's why this Bill of Rights speaks out specifically about the right to freedom of religion and the free exercise of it. So if you, well, I mean, you ask yourself that. What would you do if you're on the court? See, this, if you were on the court and it was brought to you, it has to be brought to the court, by the way. Because if nobody does anything, nobody challenges it, then they just let the legislature or the executive branch run all over them. They might do that. I mean, look, we didn't go to church in my place for months. Of course, thank God it was online. What would we have done if it wasn't? Of course, a lot of people are like, thank God. You don't have to go to church. Because I know church isn't always fun, right? Depends on who's preaching. Or what they're preaching, right? All the same, you have a right to the free exercise, and so there's a claim that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment or the free exercise of it, thereof, it says. All right, or prohibiting the free exercise or abridging the freedom of speech. All right, can you say anything you want? Can you? What's the limits to what you can say? To your free speech?
What can you not say?
Yeah, I mean, you have a right to say whatever you want. It's America.
Yeah, but
It's America.
like threat somebody.
Is that nice? I'm going to be mean to you. I will not like you anymore. What if I tell a lie? Do I have a free? What's it? Go ahead. Oh, I just hoped you did. What do you think? Keep going. Nothing. You just. Do you have any ideas of where we should draw a line, or should there be no line?
Well, I think most people, since, like, according to this, I guess people have the freedom to say what they want to say, but...
About anything.
Well, yes.
No matter how vulgar it is.
To a certain extent, because that most of the time they deal with moral backlash.
So we'll
not like
shun
saying,
you.
not condoning it or anything, but, like...
Fine. I mean, look at some of the crap out there. I mean, there's some funny comedians out there who say some pretty bad stuff.
Yeah.
Look at Cardi B. She's not a comedian, she's a singer. She says some pretty vulgar stuff. Should she have a right to say that?
But yeah, I mean, technically, well, yeah, she does.
I mean, it depends on what you mean by right. Did God create us to have potty mouths?
No.
No. He gave us mouths to glorify. Okay. Obviously, but should we allow people to do it? I mean, can we sit there and have the thought police go around? Which, by the way, there's a problem right now on college campuses. UC Berkeley, if I were to go give a lecture on the, 5 great things about being a conservative, politician or whatever. Why 5 reasons why I love Trump. Do you think they would allow me to do that? There would be Antifa out there, they'd be destroying the whole campus. Ben Shapiro, are you guys familiar with this stuff going on these campuses? Not at all? Oh boy. gotta look at this stuff. There's riots on like Berkeley when they bring in like Ben Shapiro or people from PragerU, these conservatives, and these college groups. They try to shut down what these guys are saying. Why do they do that? Because they believe that they are speaking, listen to this, they are uttering hate speech. And hate speech ought not be allowed. Now, what do they mean by hate speech? In reality, it's just speech that disagrees with their political views, okay? But like if I said, I love Donald Trump, they would see that as hate speech. And they'd be like, oh, I'm triggered, okay? And then they'd be like, you gotta shut up, man. Take that red hat off, okay? And I'm not being hyperbolic, unfortunately. I wish I was. There are enough YouTube videos out there of people with red hats getting punched in the face, okay? I wear this red hat all the time. It doesn't say Trump on it, or MAGA. It says, can't even remember. I ran a marathon, and it was to raise money for vets, okay? But it's like something for a charity for our Marines or something like that. And I swear, I walked down the street, people were like looking at the hat, you know? I want to get the one that says made you look, you know? Because everybody, well, anyway, yes, you're allowed to wear it. Legally you are. But right now, there are people trying to shut that down. They're trying to shut down political speech. Have you heard about the story of Hunter Biden? Well, tell me what's going on with Hunter Biden.
A guy turned.
Where did you hear it from?
Multiple outlets. No.
Multiple outlets. You heard from the New York Times?
Yeah, and
The New York Times is covering this?
Well, not. I've heard it from the. Well, I saw the New York Post article.
New York Post.
And then
Their
I saw
competitor.
the stuff because of like Twitter and Facebook.
You didn't see it on Twitter.
No, I didn't see it on Twitter.
What happened on Twitter?
Well, they Twitter and Facebook.
Twitter and Facebook blocked the New York Post, one of the largest newspapers in the nation,
Yeah.
because they criticized.
Well, they leaked it. Well, they like not.
They didn't leak it.
They
That's a
had-
real story.
Yeah, they had it, and they also said that like the guy that had the laptop also said he took it to the like
FBI.
the FBI, and then they didn't do anything about it.
So what's on this laptop?
It had it had emails between him and different foreign nations
Yeah.
of like him setting up meetings with that included his
Kickbacks
dad,
and
and they had there was
payments
one
and
specific
pay for
email
play.
that there's one specific email that they're like bringing like that they're really pushing is the one where it like I can't remember which leader or not leader but one person I think it's either Ukraine or
Ukrainian.
he said that thank you for the the meeting
Yeah.
was nice seeing your dad like your
Right.
father.
We're talking things Joe Biden had denied for one.
Also a lot of drug pictures.
A lot of pictures of Biden's son with a crack pipe in his mouth, and a lot of pornography, allegedly some of it with him. And then there's this is alleged, so
Yeah.
one of the guys doing the investigation at the FBI is a child pornography guy, meaning he investigates child porn and child predators. So you go, Joe Biden's son's involved with all of this. Joe Biden is also connected to the pay for play, which is very bad. That's corruption charges. And what happened when that came out?
Well,
Facebook and Twitter shut them up, right?
Yeah.
Said you're not going to post that here.
Yeah, and they Twitter. I know Twitter released a statement saying that they flagged it because it was they didn't like they said something about like the contents of it being like they didn't know if it was legitimate or
Sure.
something.
Right. But of course they've put all sorts of other stuff out, like the Trump dossier, which was completely debunked. It's still out there. They don't care about certain things. What ended up happening is they're silencing their political enemies. That's what they're doing. It's no surprise that Twitter and Facebook, Mark Zucker is a liberal, Democrat liberal, and there's this big complaint by the conservatives that Twitter and Facebook are silencing the conservatives, so you don't hear their side of the story, right? So they shut down this thing. The New York Post is still shut down, and if you go ahead, Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary, she posted the story. Twitter shut down her Twitter account. Okay, why would you do that? After all, now it has been corroborated. Okay, those are his emails. Okay, people who were the recipients of those emails said, "Yeah, nope, I sent that to him, and he sent it back." So they're like, "Okay, that stinks." Okay, so
They were also trying to, because I saw a different perspective of them talking about it, and they said that that one of the main reasons, like, well, if this guy's super rich and stuff, why would you think that he would go take his computer to get repaired? He would just get a new one, and that was like some. So
Well,
they're
that's all
just trying
great,
to say
but,
that it
I
wasn't
mean-
real. Like, I mean,
that's.
I think that.
What if I told you I was super rich and I'm not going to go buy a new laptop every time it crashes? And by the way, let me give you a good reason why. Because there's sensitive stuff on there that you need to get access to. What would have happened to his computer if he's looking at all this porn? Usually people have that problem. They get locked out of their own computer because they get what's called spyware, ransomware. Because they go to sites they shouldn't be going to. You know, and then people go, aha, and they send, you know. So, yeah, and you know what's funny? Is he left it there, which tells us he did go get a new computer. Okay, so he left it there. The owner of the shop took ownership of it. The real question isn't whether or not he was willing to get a new laptop. Certainly he was, and certainly he could. The question is, are those really his emails? And it turns out that they actually are. Is it really him in the pictures with a crack pipe, or did Russia just kind of superimpose a crack pipe on him? I'll admit that's possible. I will admit that. The question is that actual? And upon investigation, that's what they need to figure it out. But you don't just silence a story of the media. Why don't you do that? Now, by the way, Twitter is not a publicly traded company, and it's a privately owned business. They can do whatever they want. Okay? Now, there's reasons why Twitter shouldn't, legal reasons, because they enjoy certain privileges that are granted to them by the government. Okay? And in as much as they act like a third-party private entity and to give people their views and silence others, they ought not get those privileges, and that's what's going on in Congress right now that they're talking about today, whether or not they should be getting those privileges that they enjoy, and or are they going, you know. Anyway, so freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and it's freedom of assembly in as long as it is peaceful. Right? So all of this is going on right now. Should we be breaking up the Black Lives Matter movement right now as they assemble? Well, that depends. In as much as they're peaceful, they just go ahead, say, hey, we're holding up signs, we believe we are being oppressed, we believe change is needed, we want you to hear our voice, we're going to walk down the street, we're going to have our march, we're going to end it at a certain time. But as soon as bottles start being thrown at police officers that are frozen water bottles, as soon as windows are being broken and stores are being looted, as soon as buildings are going up in flames, then you ask the question, are they exercising their right, or are they exhibiting insurrection, rebellion? Some people say, well, it's not the Black Lives Matter group, it's Antifa that comes and they do it, okay? And it's a group of people that go to these rallies, these peaceably protests, and then once, you know, everybody else is like, okay, we're out of here, then these guys kind of take over and start destroying things. Is pulling down statues, is that a peaceful protest? Yes? You say no. No, right? That's vandalism, correct? Even if you don't like the statue. How should you go about getting rid of statues? You don't break them down. You go through the legislative branch. You know, and I understand it. Like, if I lived in the former USSR, you think I'd want to be walking around looking at images of Stalin? Right? I can understand that. Hitler? You think Germany wants a bunch of swastikas and Nazi symbols around? So I can understand it. I certainly understand it. Now maybe you want to go put them in a museum somewhere to go, hey, look at that jerk, you know? Like, I don't want to see Margaret Sanger when I walk into the Smithsonian, okay? Well, that's our First Amendment. I think we're out of time, joking. You see how, what a great though, just a great outline to discuss current events, if nothing else. Amendment 2. It doesn't get any less controversial. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, and the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What kind of gun do you own? What's your favorite gun that you own?
I don't know.
I know. That's called question begging. It presupposes you own a gun. It's kind of like, do you still beat your wife, right? It's like if a guy, when you watch the debate tonight, you'll get extra credit, okay? And just write what you see. And then I'll put a little assignment up so you guys can turn it in, okay? But if Donald Trump brings it up, the right to bear arms, you know, he's going to accuse Joe Biden of stripping people of the right to bear. You don't own a gun. Do you feel a need to? No. Even if Trump gets reelected? Because, you know, I mean, he's coming for you, they say. I don't know what he's going to come do once he gets there, but he's going to show off his nice hair. But what if he was the jerk everybody believed he is? What if he was a tyrant? What if he really is a tyrant that the people say he's worse than Hitler? Have you heard people say he's worse than Hitler? You've not heard? You got to pay attention. I'm not scolding you, but thank God you have. What do you listen to for your news?
I mean, I listen to a bunch of things.
Like?
Pretty
Do all
much-
your friends like Trump?
No, some of them, but not all of them.
'Cause the reason I ask that is because, like, if you've never heard him called Hitler, I mean, that's, wow. You ever watch MSNBC?
Yes.
You ever watch them, okay? Joy Reid. You know who Joy Reid is?
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, what does she think of Trump? She hates him. Oh my God, she hates him so bad. She thinks he's a Nazi. She thinks he's as bad as Hitler. You know who Hitler was, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, killed a lot of people, I hear. Is Hitler really that bad? If he's that bad, wouldn't you want to own a gun? That he's going to come for you,
If he was, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Boy, yeah, if he was that bad. Well, so you could imagine the original, those establishing this government asking the question, why should we have a well-regulated militia? You know, we're talking about, they just fought a war, gaining their independence from England, and one of the claims was that the government was tyrannical. And the well-regulated militia is there to protect them from external enemies, and the right to bear arms is to protect yourself from internal tyranny, internal enemies. That is, if your own state turns itself on you, its guns on you, that you would have the ability not to just defend yourself from any thug that breaks through your door, but that you would have the right to defend yourself against a police state that is now tyrannizing you. Now, obviously, with the right to bear arms, it's no obligation to bear arms. Now, there are states that, there's one state, I think, in their constitution, although it's not enforced, was the obligation to have a weapon for that purpose. So you can imagine, as it was originally written, they had an obligation to be part of the militia, and to be part of the militia, you had to be prepared. Is anybody in, have you ever fired a gun?
Not a real one.
Staple gun? Nerf gun?
BB gun.
BB gun, eh? Have you? What do you think? Yeah. It's like, it's a tool, right? Once you start shooting them, you're like, all right, been there, did that, let's move on. But some people, the mystery of it, because they don't shoot guns, it's like, oh, we gotta get rid of these, they're scared of them. You own any guns?
My dad does.
Your dad does? Do you ever shoot with him?
I didn't shoot with him. I've like gone out to camp and stuff and did shooting. I want to learn though.
Yeah. You know, women tend to be better shots at men. It's gonna be weird to say that, right? When they are learning, because they're better students than men. Why is that? Well, because often the boys have gone shooting with their BB guns, shooting with their dad. They learn bad habits, and then say we go into the military, and now our arms instructors are trying to teach us how to, you know, shoot correctly, and the guys are all like, well, I already know how to do this stuff, and the girls are like, tell me more, and they apply it the way it's supposed to. Next thing you know, they're popping off, you know, expert shots, and guys, you know, using Kentucky windage are kind of missing their target often, so it's kind of cool. Anyway, right to bear arms, whether or not, and by the way, I want to know where that's limited to. Can I own a tank? Why not?
Isn't it like you can't own like?
By the way, I can own a tank.
You can.
Yeah. I might not be able to, you know,
Use it.
have the rounds to put in that cannon. I mean, where am I going to get? But in fact, one of our mayoral candidates not only owns a tank, but he had it parked out in front of his house in River Oaks, and he was upsetting his neighbors. Where you're going to park the tank is a problem, okay? Owning a tank's one thing, parking it's another, and then of course having the munition, the let's say the gun that actually operates. There's the issue. Can you have a tank where the gun actually operates? That might be the problem. Can I own my own cannon? You know, like can I have a howitzer, you know, 5.56 millimeter, you know? I don't know. I mean, that's a question. Especially if it's in case of tyranny, right? Shouldn't you be able to have that which it takes? I mean, you can buy your own fighter jet. Whether or not you can arm it with missiles, that's another story. Okay, you can buy like MiGs, Russian MiGs from the 70s, if you have a few $1 million and a place to put it. All right, Amendment 2. So, does anybody want to get rid of that though? Do you think if we got rid of guns, we'd get rid of crime? You don't think so?
No.
No. Do you think we would?
Maybe a little bit, but not a lot.
It's a very, you know, you go, well, you get rid of all guns, nobody would ever get shot. The problem is you're not going to get rid of all guns. It's like getting rid of drugs. Wait, I'm sorry, that doesn't work. See, there's a big black market for guns where people actually manufacture guns with no serial numbers specifically to sell on the black market. I saw this great documentary on it. It was kind of wild. You know, you got these, what we were called, you know, the cottage industry is, right? It's not it's where, you know, each person makes their own goods and they sell it, you know. It's before the assembly line. Well, they got these groups in the Philippines, out in the, you know, jungle, in these little huts, making guns that they sell to Americans, and they smuggle them in, and it's crazy. And you go, why would you smuggle that in here? Well, because you can't buy a gun if you're a felon. So when next time you commit a felony, and then you go try to buy a gun, they're gonna do your name, and they're gonna, I'm sorry, I can't say this gun, you're a felon. You're like, well, where am I gonna get a gun to go rob this bank? And then you go, well, I know a guy, and he knows a guy, and this guy just happens to know a guy who sells guns under the table, and you don't even need to worry about it. They're made in somewhere else. Amendment 3, no soldier shall be in a timepiece be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in the manner to be prescribed by law. That was a big deal in their day. Not really. It's not that it will never be. You don't need to write all this down. I mean, you know, this is written for you. I could also put the document online if I haven't already. Amendment 4, the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, paper, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by the oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So it has to be very specific, right? So you can't have, an investigation in search of a crime, right? You investigate crimes that occurred. You don't just walk up to you and I say, pull you over, and I say, ma'am, can I see your driver's license registration? You say, sure, that's your obligation, by the way. And I say, ma'am, I'd like to step out of the car. I'm gonna turn you around. I'm gonna pat you down for my own protection, which is perfectly fine. Make sure you don't have any weapons, okay? Okay, I'm gonna place you in handcuffs just for my own protection. You allow me to do this because you're just gonna be a good citizen. Now, it's uncomfortable. It's reasonable in the fact that, now, of course, it may be unreasonable, but where the line will be crossed is when I say, ma'am, I'm gonna place you in the car. That's not unreasonable. I'm just gonna place you in the car for my own protection. Okay, and then I'm gonna go, ma'am, I'm gonna go search your car. And I'm gonna pop your trunk to see if you have anything illegal in there. Okay, he's searching for a crime. He being me, because I'm the one who pulled you over. That's unreasonable because I do not have evidence of the crime. Now, of course, if you are covered in blood, right? And somebody had just called me and said, I saw a woman wearing a white cap with a fish on it, with a mauve sweater, driving down the road after she just killed a man with a knife, and then she shoved his body in the trunk, okay? Broke up with her the wrong way. Via text, not person, right? And then I go, and describe the vehicle, describe it, and I pull her over, and she certainly fits that. Then, of course, she goes, no, you can't search it. And I go, all right, tell you what, why don't you just wait right here? And I go make a call, say to the district attorney. I say, hey, look, I need a warrant to search this woman's trunk. And I'm gonna specifically, we're looking to find a body. We gotta be specific, and we're looking for a knife. We're gonna seize the object. I'm gonna search you. I'm not going to search your mom's house at this point because I don't have any probable cause for that. But you can't, so this is to protect against tyranny of the state going, where the police state just comes up and I'm just going to start searching you. Now I told you I got pulled over yesterday, right? What did he ask me to provide?
Your ID.
License. And I gave him my insurance. Perfectly reasonable. You need that. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. My suggestion to anybody who gets pulled over, the nicer you are, the harder it is on them to be mean to you. Okay? When I used to pull people over, I noticed the boys were horrible at that. The girls were great at it. The girls would give you the eyes, you'd be like, and you'd be like, ah. And I don't care how much you tried, it still works out. They get off more than the guys do. Because the guys make it easy on them. The guys are like, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. You're like, yeah, you did, and I gotcha. And so, anyway, there. Searches and seizures, okay? Here's one. I got pulled over once, and they wanted to search my car, and I asked them, do you have any reason to search my car? And they said, well, do you have anything on you that's illegal? I said, well, of course I don't. And they said, so why can't we search your car? I said, you can't search my car unless you have probable cause. He says, okay. I said, all right. I said, but I'll make you a deal. I told him, make you a deal. I'll let you search my car if you let me off on the ticket if you don't find anything.
Did he take it?
He took the deal, and his partner, she went off and just basically emptied my truck of every bit of trash that I had in there. And she came out, she had these 2 badges and LAPD badges. She goes, what are these? I said, oh, I'm an actor and a producer, and we were producing a film where we were playing police officers, where we had police officers in there. And those are props. And they went, yeah, that makes sense. You live in LA, and that happens all the time, which it was true too. So I did impersonate a cop on camera. Anyway, so I'm sitting here talking to her partner the whole time while she's sitting there cleaning out the truck. She comes out and says, well, I didn't find anything. I said, well, I knew that was gonna happen. And the guy goes, well, what do you think? And I said, well, hold on there, we had a deal. And he says, you're right. And he says, all right, I'll let you off with a warning, which is funny because really what it was, my tag had expired and I was on my way to City Hall to actually pay it, ironically, right as I'm moving out of LA to come to Texas. And what had made them weirded out was the fact that I had an LA driver's license with a Texas address on it. Yeah, it's kind of cool. Because I was going to grad school in Texas, so when I got it renewed, I had them send it to my address in Texas. I had a Texas address. Anyway, so with that being said, I made a deal. Their search and seizure was not unreasonable because I gave them permission. But had they just pulled me aside, handcuffed me, threw me on the ground, that wouldn't have been might have been unreasonable. That wouldn't have been the search and seizure part. But had they started taking my stuff out without my permission, without reason, probable cause, then I would have had a court case. I still would have been nice. You know why? Because it's on camera. I want the jury to make sure they know you're a good guy. All right, Amendment 5. See if we can get through this today. We're not going to. Let's stop right there. All right, I want you to read all of these, but these are, we're going to start off on the important ones. I mean, these are important. Goes without saying, those are important, but man, once we get past the 10th Amendment, there are a couple procedural ones, but then there are some very important ones to females and to the black race, okay? And those are very important, and they illustrate something about America. That the Constitution is amendable. Why is the Constitution amendable? Because it is not perfect. And how do we judge whether or not it is perfect? Against what do we judge it? Popular opinion? Pray that we don't, because popular opinion changes. We should judge it against the natural law. And once you judge it against the natural law and it fails, that's when you amend it. And we say all men are created equal. Well, if they are created equal, they must be treated equal. And if they are not being treated equal under the law must change. And the Constitution changed in light of how we treat our fellow humans according to the natural moral law. All right? And I'll end there.